So should European governments jettison the austerity drive as Washington is urging? We're joined now by Martin Wolf from the Financial Times. Martin, thank you so much for being with us. It's an oversimplification, we'll just say at the very start, to say it's one or the other. But does Lou have a point? Do you think that the Europeans should shift their strategy?
I agree completely with what Mr. Liu would say. I think the strategy of the Eurozone is clearly self-defeating, indeed disastrous. It's generating complete stagnation in the Eurozone economies and pushing the peripheral countries into ever deeper recessions. Germany can't be a locomotive because its demand is stagnant. So Mr. Liu is right. Unfortunately, Mr. Liu, I suspect, will have no influence where it really matters. The policy won't change, and he will go home empty-handed. I wish that weren't the case, but I think it's the reality.
Very much as did Timothy Geithner, who was making the very same sort of pleas. Martin, from the perspective on this side of the Atlantic, both investors and policymakers are watching what goes on, especially in countries like Greece, where the situation just gets worse and worse in the southern sphere completely, and just see it as an inevitability that something is going to happen, that someone will leave the euro, that these economies are just trapped in what looks like a death spiral. What do you see as the outcome? Is there any way out of this? Because the people here, from this perspective, don't seem to see it.
Yes, I know that is the almost universally held European view. I think it's clear, to me at least, that on the current set of policies, we can't expect anything that looks or feels like a recovery in southern Europe for years. It will happen in the end, but it will happen in the most painful imaginable way, and it could be for many, many years. So if you look at it as logically as a sort of economic process, you would say no country can live with this. They're going to have to leave. It will break up. But at the same time, you have to remember this is, and it is a cliche, but it's true, it's a profoundly political project. They are terrified of the political consequences of leaving, and also, of course, the economic consequences, because leaving the single currency is a tremendously messy, disorderly process. It would involve unquestionably exchange controls, comprehensive defaults, probably by both the public and private sectors, possibly a spike to very, very high inflation, and nobody knows what would then happen to them. So what keeps people in is the fear of leaving on the one hand, and a still very strong faith in this European idea, which, to be fair, the countries in the core and the central bank have done just enough to satisfy. They've always done just enough to give the people in trouble the sense, well, maybe in the end it'll come out right. I tend to think, on balance, it will survive, though I'm not that confident of this. But it's a very long, drawn and painful process, and it won't end quickly, as so many Americans seem to think.
Martin, it's Nina in London. So how do you think, if it does survive, it'll change?
Well, as far as I understand the German strategy, which can sometimes be difficult, they have two objectives. One, to make everybody in Europe behave like Germans. That's going to be a long slog. And two, when they have shown enough willingness to do that, then they are prepared to contemplate a true banking union and some sort of fiscal union to back it up. The details we don't know, but that would, of course, solve at least many of the problems. But what we're talking about here is a very long-term project of reform, which I think won't be completed until the next decade. And the ultimate question is, does anybody have the time to live with that sort of extended timetable?
Martin Wolf from the Financial Times, thank you so much for sharing your insight on a problem, a dilemma that just does not seem to go away. Martin Wolf from the Financial Times in London. Coming up on World Business Today,